YouTube, it's Kim at K. Becker's Books. I took the first part of this video outside and it was way too sunny. The sun was glaring in my face. So I moved it in here into my living room, and in the next part of the clip you're going to hear me say, here's the indoor version, and that's why, because it was just way too glaring outside. Hope you enjoy the video. So here's the indoor version. Change of scenery. I couldn't take it. I tried to sit in different angles outside and the sun was just shining right in my eyes, and I'm super sensitive to that, and there was eye watering everywhere, so here we are indoors. Let me get started on my bookish week. Unfortunately, I had 2 DNFs. The first one was most unfortunate, and it is Paris Trout by Pete Dexter. This is the very first Barter Hordes book club selection, and I got almost halfway through and I DNF'd it. I'm not going to give you all the commentary right now because the group is currently discussing it on Voxer, so I didn't want to prematurely put my thoughts out in public on my video. I'll actually talk about this one next week. The other one I DNF'd was The Good Son, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to try to pronounce the author's name, but I'll put a picture here. And I started to read this on my Kindle. It's a work of translated fiction, and I was going into it knowing that it was a kind of a murder thriller, but I'm not into the blood and gore, and you know, here and there it's fine. I understand that's part of crime thrillers. I'm not naive, but I just didn't enjoy this one. The writing was really good, but I was just like, no, this isn't for me, and I put it aside. And I know that other people have read it and really liked it. So I actually finished 3 books this week. I finally finished this one, How Races Lived in America by the New York Times. This is a compilation of long-form articles written and collected by the New York Times. And this was done back in the very late 90s, so a little over 20 years ago. It was a very good collection. There were some articles that I liked more than others. Just like a short story collection. You're not going to love every single one. But one of the best parts of this book is it discusses race from the individual's point of view. It's not really discussing systemic racism and racism as a theme in our country, especially today, because like I said, this was written a little over 20 years ago. But what struck me is the content that discusses the time before Black Lives Matter and our current consciousness on race in America. But the articles were very well written by New York Times reporters of all different genders and races. And that was my favorite part of the book, was the perspective of racism from individuals, both Black and white. The second book I finished is, and this is for my in real life book group with the Critical Chicks, is Deacon King Kong by James McBride. And Critical Chicks, if you're watching and you don't want to hear what I thought about this book, then stop my video now or fast forward or whatever you want to do, because our discussion is taking place next week. I'm filming this on Saturday morning. This was a fun, hot mess of a book to read. I didn't love it, but it was fun. It kept me reading. Deacon King Kong is the story of our main character, Deacon King Kong, who is a church deacon. King Kong relates to the homemade liquor that he constantly drinks because he is a drunk. He is an alcoholic, but more realistically, he is a drunk. It discusses the housing project of the Causeways in Brooklyn, New York in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. And Deacon walks, as he's very drunk, walks up to a young drug dealer in the community, a 19-year-old drug dealer, and proceeds to shoot him and possibly try to kill him, but does not end up killing him, ends up shooting his ear off. Now, part of the hot mess of this book is McBride introduces so many different characters. The fun part is that they're all very colorful, very unique. They're part of the housing project community. And James McBride wrote a memoir, The Color of Water, which, as far as I know, I haven't read it yet, as far as I know, details his childhood and growing up in the housing projects in New York. So there's so many characters in here. So much of the storyline is like quite unrealistic. There's a lot of side stories and offshoots, And it was very difficult at first to keep track of the different storylines. And at times I was like, do I need to remember that character? How much of that character do I need to remember? But the story was all over the place. There were a lot of different narratives. And I kept thinking, which one is the most important to keep track of? There are Italian mobsters, there are white drug dealers, there are elderly women who are, you know, the mother of one of the Italian mobsters. There's a lot of discussion about the race and the interactions between Italians and blacks and white cops. It was, like I said, a hot mess. It was a fun read. You could read into some of the commentary in the book. There's so many storylines and so many characters. Again, it was fun. Wasn't my favorite, wasn't the best, but it was fun. And so, as you saw in our picnic video, the other book I finished this week was Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. This was so much fun to read and exactly what I needed. It is a romance set in 1879 in London and parts of England. It discusses the women's suffragette movement in England, actually. And it's a story of Annabelle Archer, who is part of the suffragist movement in London. And she's part of a group of women whose job is to campaign and solicit donations from rich men. And so they kind of put themselves outside of Parliament and a lot of locations around the city where they know that rich lords and rich, wealthy, I just said rich and wealthy, they mean the same thing, where men of position, they're trying to gather men to the cause. And she ends up trying to solicit donations from the Duke of Montgomery, Sebastian, and our romance and fun and frolics develops from there. But I actually learned a lot in this book. Even though it's a romance, and it was so fun to read. Annabelle actually works kind of as a drudge in her cousin's household, and she ends up getting a scholarship to Oxford University right when they're starting to educate women. And she's involved, like I said, in the suffragist movement. And they are trying to change the laws for to allow women to vote, but also to allow women to own property. They are also trying to gain support to change the Married Women's Property Act. They're trying to pass new laws that would allow women to inherit property and to own property in order for them to be far more independent. Now, if you've read any Jane Austen, you'll understand that the Married Women's Property Act was what stopped women from inheriting and what drove women into poverty and dependence on male relatives. So the book is talking about the suffragist movement and the Women's Property Act. Really interesting stuff, and there's a little bit of commentary from the author at the end of the book. But it was so much fun. I was ready to read a romance, and there's actually some sexy, steamy bits in here too. So if you're not into that in romance, just FYI, it's in here. It was fun, and it's in here. So I finished that yesterday. It took me like 2 days to read it because I just did not want to put it down. So this is a really good one if you're interested in reading a romance. Put my phone in the water. That wouldn't be good.
Sounds like the dock is yelling.
Yeah. What am I currently reading? I am currently reading These Truths by Jill Lepore. It's in every single one of my videos. It will be for a year because I will be currently reading it. I am also continuing to read my buddy read, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clark, and I'm reading this with Freddie from Sluggish Reader. That's a really fun read as well, so it's been good to have those fun reads in between some of the serious traumatic stuff I've read lately. Way too heavy, so it's been nice to have some other stuff. Speaking of heavy, I'm reading Paradise by Toni Morrison, which is the August selection for the Toni Morrison 2020, hosted by Hannah at Hannah's Books. And I'm not very far into this. I think I've read the first chapter. And this is a book about an all-black town in Oklahoma right after... not right after, but not very long after the emancipation of slaves. And there are several black families that find property in Oklahoma, and they create a paradise of all black inhabitants. And it's the irony in the title of Paradise is Morrison talks about a town named Ruby. And within that town, there is a converted convent that was created into a home for women. And at the very beginning of the book, there are 9 black men, armed and dangerous, who are intending on raiding this converted convent and home for women and killing the inhabitants because they've been made to understand or led to understand that these women, it's a house of ill repute. The women are involved in cult activity, in sexual depravity. So these men take it upon themselves to raid the converted convent and take care of the women there. That's not exactly what the house is about, but I know I'm going to learn more about that the further I read. So far, I absolutely love the writing in this book. I finished Jazz last month and I wasn't crazy about it, but again, it's Toni Morrison. Her writing is spectacular and looking forward to continuing with that one. So I think that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video of the beach in New Hampshire and Prescott Park in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I used to work right across the street from that, and it was just a joy to take breaks and to walk in the flower gardens and stand at the fence and just look out at the ocean and the boats and downtown Portsmouth is lovely. There's so many things to do, so many restaurants. Not a lot of that these days, but the park there were hardly any people in the park. We spread out a blanket, we had our picnic, we enjoyed the flower gardens, the water. And then we drove down the coast off Route 1 and all along the beach road, looked at the mansions in Rye, New Hampshire, which is one of my favorite things to do, went onto the beach, enjoyed the water, collected rocks, and just had a great day. So I hope you enjoyed all that footage. Write a comment down below on any of the books I showed you or anything I talked about. Let me know if you have any questions. If you haven't subscribed already, I would love for you to do that. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.